So this is our topic today. It is great meetings. You can have great meetings and you can have inspiring, effective, productive meetings. It is possible. And as I alluded to in the introduction for the webinar, so often our meetings are painful or discouraging or frustrating. Like, why am I even here? And a lot of that falls on us, the leaders who are planning and leading the meeting. So Craig is an expert in this. I mean, I wish we had 2 hours to spend with you today, Craig, but we're going to spend 1 hour. And before we do, just tell everybody what you do and why this is important to you.
Yeah. Oh man, I love talking about meetings. I feel like if there's one indicator or one place to dig into to help organizations, teams reach their potential, it's in meetings. And meetings should be the best part of work. And so often they're the worst part of work. So yeah, this is like a real passion of mine, which is a funny thing to introduce myself as like Craig and I like meetings. It's like a weird way to introduce myself to people, but it's true. So yeah, I moved into, it was a CEO previously and then a content creator and then worked myself out of my CEO job. And one of the hardest things for me to learn how to do as a leader was to lead effective meetings. And then that became the greatest gift to me and my executive team. And then we had about 50 people that worked in the company that I led. And so when I transitioned out of the CEO job, I started moving into consulting. And now I help organizations, I say, like, discover and reach their potential. It's a lot of offsite facilitation, some executive coaching. The thing I do the most, though, is help first-time leaders really get the right tools they need in their tool belt to be effective in leadership with a thing called 90-Day Leader. That's like a 12-week program that we have businesses buying seats for. And so just love helping people reach their potential as a leader, say yes to leadership, be effective in their leadership, and then love seeing how that helps them flourish, their teams flourish, and companies actually flourish and reach their potential.
Let's also add that Craig is a man of faith. He's been in the church his whole life, and parishes being more effective and inspiring, and parish leaders being more effective is a big desire of his. But we're going to jump into our topic now and stay on track for this meeting. And we're going to talk about, as a leader of a meeting, what are some important questions to ask yourself about the meeting, before the meeting, to really help position you to lead great meetings? So the first question that I have, that I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Craig. If anyone's listened to me speak before, they know my favorite question is why. It gets to the heart of the matter on anything that we do. And so I think before a leader plans a meeting in any way, they need to ask themselves, why am I having this meeting? Tell us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most missing ingredients. And I find that this is true in offsites all the way down to like daily huddles or stand-up meetings is one of the things that we fail to do as leaders or miss doing is just reminding people or clarifying for people like why this is so essential. Not only that we have the meeting that we're about to have, but that we are really present for it in mind, in soul, and in body, and we're not constantly distracted with other things, but we're present for the meeting, that we offer our full perspective and ability in this meeting and don't hold back anything that's going to be of value. And honestly, that we are as effective with this time as possible and setting stakes for what happens if we're not. So reminding people of, hey, if we don't do a good job for the next 10 minutes or the next hour, what happens to us? What happens to our teams that we lead? What happens to the people that we impact through our church or our business on other types of consulting? Like why is this hour so important? Even I found the most committed, even optimistic, passionate people can get really can fail to remember why this meeting matters, and they can honestly just bide time until it's over, and the to-do list that's in front of them can feel more important than the conversations that are in front of them for the meeting. And we have to, in every meeting, take a second or a few minutes and remind even the most passionate people why this meeting matters, why it's on the calendar, that it's not just a recurring thing that we have to do. It's not obligatory. That is a massive opportunity. And there's real problems that will happen if we don't do this well.
So you got to bring clarity to yourself. Why am I having this meeting? Communicate well to the people that are coming to this meeting, why it's happening. And then, as you said, when the meeting starts, set out that vision for here's why we're together. Colleen said, main pain point is people agonizing about meetings. And I think that happens a lot when their goals are vague and unclear, or they're not led well. John said too many people getting off topic. And, when you lead a meeting, which we'll talk later about how to lead a meeting well, you've got to lead. And if people are off topic, you've got to bring it back in and rein it back in. Um, Colleen, I'm sorry, someone else asked, another John asked, knowing when is better as an email and or versus a meeting, also helping meetings produce fruit. But I've got to share this meme that I've got here. Uh, Sorry, I love a good meme. Yes, you were not at that meeting because it should have been an email. What is a meeting that should have been an email look like, Craig?
Man, so good. I think a good meeting is just the right people talking about the right things in the right ways. And that does not include updates. If information and updates can and should be given outside of people being together, and the value of a meeting is there has to be context where everyone's aligned and on the same page. So, to some degree, there's some information sharing, maybe just to make sure that everyone knows the same thing, the most updated information, like for context building, and to align the group of people around what problems and opportunities are in front of us today and for the next hour, and how do we prioritize tackling those. That should be done as quickly as possible and only for the goal of identifying what should be in the agenda, not for sharing things that could have been in an email or should have been an email. And then a good meeting that produces fruit is one that has debate, I would say, and like really healthy sharing of perspectives, that it's takes a lot longer to do that by email or Slack communication or text. And then you have to go to this person and this person. The way to know if it's an email is if I'm sharing information or just updating people, email. If this is going to drive us into conversation and debate, it should happen in a meeting with the right people present, so we're not having it six different times in six different ways, because that costs us time instead of saving us time, and we don't make good decisions that way. And it should drive us to decision making. Like that debate and conflict should drive us to actually making decisions that move things forward, where people can be committed and aligned. So that's my separation. Is if it's information or updating, as much of that done in email as possible, and expect people to show up having read that, and don't redo it for them. Like make it cost something to them, to where they have to like go catch themselves up because they're missing out on things they need. Or if the debate happens and it's clear someone didn't read it, call them out on that and say, hey, we're trying to save everyone time and make really good decisions in this meeting. The only way we do that is if you show up prepared. And these meetings are going to set stakes for what's going to happen if people don't show up reading, so that the next time they know, oh man, I'm going to set an alarm in 10 minutes before my meeting. I'm going to check my inbox and actually read whatever I needed to, because I don't want to be the guy that didn't for the next one. So information updating is email. Meetings should be for debate and decision making and alignment.
I realize some of the things that Craig is talking about here are scary, like holding people accountable, making it clear, here's what we're doing in this meeting. But you cannot have an effective culture without accountability. You can't have a healthy culture without accountability. So if all we're doing is avoiding holding people accountable, avoiding them showing up on time, avoiding making sure they read stuff or calling them out, I can't help you at that level of dysfunction, because that's not going to be effective in any setting. I just included a book in the chat, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. It is a great book on how to lead well, but also how to lead courageously and create a culture where people can discuss conflict or discuss debate of ideas in a healthy way. So important to effective meetings. And just to reemphasize what Craig said, if your meeting is an agenda of people reporting back on what they are doing or have been doing, and that's all in a printed document that's in front of them, and it's all just read through, that is such a waste of time. Get people to do that ahead of time and then come with their questions and then facilitate and guide that. So let's talk about what the meeting looks like. Is it in person? Is it virtual? Is it a stand-up meeting? How long is it? How do we determine all of that?
Yeah, man, such a good question. I think there's some different categories or buckets of meetings that I recommend that teams have on their calendar. And that's not so that we can, the biggest offender of waste of time and boring meetings is the recurring meetings. Typically, the worst meeting in any organization is the stand up weekly tactical or weekly all hands or all team meeting or whatever it is. That's just the update meeting. That's the one I would try to fix first, and drive that to be as much debate and decision making as possible. And so, but I think it is a really key rhythm to have. And so I think rhythms are really key because we shouldn't have to every day and every week think, oh, what meeting should we have? And how long should that be? And who should be there? And then carve out space on people's times. Like we have to have buckets for our meetings, which I think starts with a daily huddle for teams that are actively working on projects together. And the goal of that is making sure everyone's aligned on the most important priorities for their day and they're not missing any. And that people understand the stakes of accomplishing those priorities based on what other people on their team need to be able to be effective. So that 10 or 15 minutes every day should save everyone at least an hour, hour and a half, and allow those things to be done in a more effective way and get a lot better ROI on the day. So that's like, I think you need to have that kind of rhythm. I think that's virtual or in person, is great for it. Depending on the culture of the organization is absolutely fine. And then I think about like the rhythm of weekly tactical, of a weekly sync, I think is best done in person. I think debate and decision making happens best in person when it's possible. And you're a lot more prone to updates and listening and multitasking when you're virtual, is what I found with teams. And that's, I consult and led with churches and organizations that are pretty much fully virtual and can be very effective. So if virtual is what you have and it's the tool that's available to you, it's better to use that than have no meeting. But I think meetings where there's more debate and decision making, like offsites or weekly syncs or tacticals or strategic sort of ad hoc meetings where we're going to dive in and solve this problem or seize this opportunity, those are typically better done in person if possible, and having blocks and times set aside for those that the right people are invited to make sure that you can maximize the time. And so, yeah, so I think in person for debate decision making, virtual for really anything else should save people time and allow for some flexibility. But no, that doesn't. I've done a few offsites virtual. Didn't love that. I felt like they were pretty ineffective compared to in person. And so, big recommender of offsites being in person. Everything else I think can be done effectively virtually if it has to be.
Yeah, I there's a parish that I've worked with that does a every morning stand up huddle with their staff, and it's just 15 minutes. It is a disciplined 15 minutes. The pastor welcomes everybody, um, gives them an inspiring thought for the day that ties to the mission of the parish. He says, "Is there anything that we need to know about that's happening on the campus today?" And then he says, look around this room. Is there anyone that you need an answer from? You're waiting on your work because there's an answer that you need from someone in this room. Either y'all pair off after this or set a time to meet today to deal with that. And then he closes it in prayer. It's quick. It is disciplined. It gets everybody on the same page. I love those types of meetings. But also like St. Monica's does a Monday that is in person and virtual, Monday morning, all hands on deck, where they have a parishioner share an inspiring story of life change with all the staff. It happens every week. Some staff join virtually, some are in person. What do you think about the importance of having meetings as a team that aren't just strategic and tactical, but are actually just to inspire people towards the mission?
Absolutely. I think about that as fitting in the bucket of like activating, and meetings can be a really effective way to activate people to be able to accomplish their jobs more effectively. One of the best ways to do that is leveraging like real stories of why what we do matters and sharing those stories and hearing from different people that represent those stories. Same thing can be hearing from different people that represent different facets of our churches and organizations, like, and why what they do matters and how that connects overall. It's really hard to replace the value of a group of people that are a team being in a room and looking at each other and realizing we're doing this together. It's really hard to replace the activation and the rallying that happens there and have the passion that comes from that, regardless of whether we're having debate or decision making or learning more about what's happening or communicating any important decisions. Like those activating meetings are so key. And I really like leveraging something like a weekly for being able to do that. That's with the whole staff and team there. I think there's a component of that for daily stand-ups. That's really effective too on a daily basis. I love the questions that you said that the church was asking in their daily stand up, I think is so good. And so, yeah, I think it's really, but call those meetings out when they're that way and let people know on the way in, actually. So I think people can be frustrated feeling like those meetings are a waste of time sometimes, especially people that are more pessimistic. Call out on the front end, hey, this meeting is just for us to get rallied and activated and remember why what we do matters. And that's what we're going to accomplish. I find so often people are really pumped to be in a meeting and actually enjoy being there as long as everyone has the same shared definition of success. And when they're more frustrated when they show up thinking, oh, there's all these ingredients that we're missing. And if you as a leader can just tell them, I know there's a lot for us to talk about and decide and do a million meetings. We could have this time, this hour is just for this. We're to accomplish this. If we accomplish this as a good meeting, people will typically share that definition with you.
Yeah, I think if our mission is to make disciples and we don't ever meet together as disciples and live as disciples, but we're called to go do it, there's a disconnect there. And leaders, pastors, I would just encourage you, it is well worth the time spent to invest in inspiring people towards your mission. And it doesn't mean you've got to spend a lot of time preparing that meeting. There's obviously like plug and play resources out there you can use. You could watch a video and have a discussion around it. You could do a Lectio Divina or a Visio Divina with your staff. You could, one thing that I was part of a team that just once a week, we read through the scriptures for that Sunday. We had a faith sharing time, and then we shared prayer intentions. And it was disciplined time-wise, but it kept us all remembering what our mission is and that we're practicing it together before we go out and try to lead others in that. Again, to that thing of length of meeting, let's talk about every meeting doesn't have to be an hour. And does it matter what time of the day we have certain meetings?
Man, absolutely. Like I know John, you like this stuff too. Like I love studying and tracking like when are people most productive around different types of work and thinking about that for myself. And one of the disciplines I had when I was a CEO is creating shared deep work blocks for everyone in our company that was company wide. We're not allowed to have meetings during these times because even if people had their own deep work blocks, it ended up not coinciding with other people. And then that creates friction in projects being effective. When everyone can have the same deep work blocks, it's amazing what happens in those blocks of time. And so I like starting the day by making sure everyone has the right priorities for the day. So a daily stand up that even if it's virtual, it should be no more than 15 if your team is like relational and fun and you want to be chatty. I think that's great actually. No more than 15 minutes, can be as short as 5 minutes. It should be a discipline that everyone shows up for. And then I think from there, like depending on how many people are in your weekly sync and what you're covering there, can be as short as 45 minutes. I've seen really effective weekly syncs and tacticals be as long as an hour and a half. I think if you get more than 90 minutes in a meeting, people start to get brain fog. So I like short stand-ups in the morning, as much of the morning as possible for getting in deep work and accomplishing meaningful things. So not in meetings and actually turning off notifications on Slack as much as possible or email or text messages. And then I think afternoons are stellar for us having like syncs that are once a week or having strategic ad hoc meetings I think about those in 90-minute blocks of, what can we knock out, problems can we tackle, and opportunities can we seize in 90 minutes, and scheduling those as we need them. And then I have 2 to 3 day offsites for executive teams as a discipline on the calendar. We keep those no matter what. It always feels like time to get away, and then it always ends up saving time and money on the backside when we have those. So and those is in person and multiple days. Is how I think about those. So so short syncs in the morning, 45 minutes to an hour and a half max for your weekly sync. I would say, and then 90-minute blocks for ad hoc meetings and don't use all 90 minutes. If this really think how not how long could we talk about this or how long, but how long should we spend on this topic and be clear with everyone on the way in.
Yeah, there's a lot of meetings that could be a half an hour, but we've got to be disciplined as the leader of the meeting. We've got to have a plan, and we've got to be disciplined with that plan and follow it. And sometimes that means telling people, "Hey, you need to take this offline." We'll talk. I'm kind of getting out of order here, but we'll talk more about how to lead well. I want to share with you just along the timing thing, though, an image that is outline of a day of meetings that I'm leading. And this is how detailed it is. And this is how you get a lot accomplished. I plan it minute by minute. So here you have when it starts, here's the duration of that, here's how many minutes it is, and here's when it stops. Here's who's leading that section. You see it's mostly me, but here's what it looks like, and here's notes on it. But if you plan out your time, you can get a lot accomplished. If you just have some bullet points that you're trying to work through and there's no time restraints given to those, and people are allowed to go off on tangents and have cross conversations in a big meeting that don't affect everyone else, then good luck. I don't know how to fix that other than to have a disciplined schedule and really lead well and invite people to take those conversations and discuss them after the meeting. So that kind of leads us into how do we identify who should be in the meeting? We've talked about why the meeting exists. We've talked about what type of meeting to have, when to have it. How do we identify who needs to be in the room for this meeting?
Man, such a good question. I think about really on projects being clear on like who's driving the project, who needs to contribute and have like their perspectives shared in order for us to make good decisions, who's just informed about things. There's RACI is a framework that I really like for responsible and accountable and contributing and or consulted and informed. And I think about for meetings, that's a really effective way to know anyone that's responsible or accountable and consulted, I think are the people that should be in meetings. Don't have people that just need to be informed in the meeting. That's one of the biggest wasters. If people should come to meetings, they typically feel like they need to offer something to that meeting. Otherwise, it wasn't valuable for their time. So the fewest possible people, I think, is the right number. And it's people whose perspective need to be given in order for good decisions to be made. And that's the question I'm asking when I'm thinking who needs to be in this conversation. It's not people, and the big offenders for that, where that grows, is it's not people that it's gonna, maybe they'll take it better if they hear it in person or in real time with everyone else. That's not a good reason to have someone in a meeting. Or, oh man, I want to skip having to send an email out or tell someone and kind of cascade what happened after the fact. That's not a good reason to have someone in a meeting. Getting into the rhythm of making sure that people actually feel updated and included in the ways they should, regardless of whether they're in meetings, so that the smallest amount of people can be in meetings possible for consulted on their perspective for driving decisions, I think is the right answer.
Give us that RACI acronym again.
Yeah, so for every project, how do we break down who's responsible for this project, who's accountable for the project, who's consulted on this project, and who's informed? And I
Uh,
think about it, responsible is like the driver. Typically, those people are leading the meetings. Accountable is just making decisions. So they're approving decisions. Sometimes that's the same person, sometimes it's different. And then consulted is kind of the participators in the project. And informed is people that it's beneficial for them to hear how it's going, as it's going, because it affects their job. And it actually equips them to do their job quicker and better if they're kind of clued in as the project's updating.
Yeah, something I also use as a kind of rubric for this is I don't even, is that the right word, rubric?
I like it.
uh, Everyone in the meeting, about 70% of what we're talking about should be relevant to them. So if we're in a staff meeting of 15 people, we don't need to talk about baptism robes when that only applies to 3 people in the meeting. We don't need to have these little side discussions about tactical things and get in the weeds over something that 80% of the people are tuned out. Has anybody been in these meetings? I see them all the time. So if somebody goes in that direction as the leader, you say, hey, why don't you guys set up a time to discuss this afterwards? It's a great thing to talk about. Let's get on track to what impacts the people in this room. So we identify who's in it. And listen, I know sometimes people get offended they're not included in a meeting. Craig and I were talking earlier. If you're making all your decisions based on not offending people or them being annoyed, you can't lead that way. You aren't going to have effective anything. So if people are frustrated, why do I have to be in this meeting? Then give them the why. Make it clear to them. I want you here because you matter to this issue. And if they're offended that they weren't included, just make it clear. Hey, I'll make sure that you get all the information that you need out of this meeting, but we needed to keep it to this number of people to make it more efficient and effective. But any questions you have for me, please feel free to reach out. Any other thoughts on that, dealing with conflict of people having to be in a meeting or not invited to a meeting?
Man, I think about it, there's pain and uncomfortability either direction. Like there's no scenario here where those things don't exist. And I'm not masochistic, but there's either the pain of the uncomfortability of telling someone, hey, we don't need you for this conversation. This is the people that we're consulting. I want to save your time and energy and make this meeting more efficient by not having you there, knowing if that's the kind of person that wants to be there. There's that uncomfortability up front, or there's the pain and uncomfortability of that person being there and it ending up lowering the efficiency of the meeting, wasting everyone's time. That person ends up actually getting frustrated and uncomfortable anyways over time because that's not an effective use of their time. You get more frustrated and uncomfortable. So you're just choosing one scenario or the other. And I try to think about that now. If there's a conversation that would be helpful to have up front, and what's more visceral for me in that moment is the pain and uncomfortability of this moment today. But if I choose not to say yes to that pain and uncomfortability today, I'm just choosing pain that's often worse and prolonged on the other side.
Yeah.
And that's a gift I can give myself. It's a gift I can give this person and the organization I'm leading. If more often than not, I choose the pain and uncomfortability of doing it up front to save us that pain and uncomfortability on the back end.
That's just important leadership 101, right? Like so often we're confronted with the pain of this one person, this one situation. And we don't think about the pain that it's going to cause multiple people if I don't deal with this one conflict issue. And so, yeah, 8 people in the meeting are going to be annoyed that I'm not leading well, but I'm catering to that one person who really is not on board anyway. So it's just so important. We're jumping into our halftime here. I want to throw out a couple other questions for you. We talked earlier about updates out of meetings and into emails. Do you have any best practices or ideas for how to structure that, how to help people give updates well, any kind of like templates or anything like that that you'd recommend?
Man, that's such a great question. I think actually coaching people on how they do email is a really effective thing to do as a leader. And so that becomes a really effective communication tool. So I try to limit fluff as much as possible. Every word in an email really matters. There's studies on if the email is more than 5 to 7 sentences, how often people shift to scan or not read it at all. And so concise is key. So cutting the fluff as much as possible, cutting even context as much as possible, that's better done outside of an email. Email is best when it's more bullet points, when I think you use actually formatting. So I love having, if there's an email and there's updates that need to happen, one sentence for setting stakes for why these updates matter to the person or the people that are on that email thread. Updates in bold with 3 to 5 bullet points of what those updates are, as concise as possible. And then a sentence at the end that's here's what to do with this information, including if there's nothing to do with it. That's actually really valuable to go ahead and tell people, hey, this is information I just needed you to know today, so that you were able to do your job with this context, with this update, with this information. Or, hey, I need so-and-so in bold or highlighted. Give me feedback on this, or reply all and let us know your decision on this or this. The more that you can have updates and even fast decisions made outside of the context of in-person meetings, the more those become actually really fun and effective because you have a few things that really require debate and decision making happening. And people actually really leverage email effectively. Like they actually start to learn how to do that and to check their thread, knowing that important things are happening there. And now you have your team leveraging all those communication tools and platforms in a way that actually drives them and the team forward. And it feels like can't miss as opposed to a drag.
Great. Well, I'm going to take a little break here just to talk a little bit about what I do, and I want Craig to share more about 90-Day Leader. And then in the second half, we're going to talk about pre-meeting communication a little more, setting people up to be successful in a meeting, how to lead a meeting well, and then some do's and don'ts that you don't want to miss. There are some don'ts that you're doing, most likely, because I've always done them, that when I realized how much they were impacting my meetings, it was just an easy fix. So I think you'll have some easy takeaways from here at the end that'll immediately help you start having better meetings. For those of you that don't know me, I'm John at Poitevent. I lead an organization called Great Catholic Parishes. For years, I was with an organization called Parish Catalyst. I'm so grateful for Parish Catalyst and Bill Simon. Parish Catalyst came out of the research that created a book called Great Catholic Parishes by Bill Simon and Claire Henning. They identified 4 practices of thriving parishes. And I won't get into those, but through that, I launched Great Catholic Parishes. And I just want you to know, I recognize some of the names of people that are in here, Reed Taylor, Father Frank Fano. They can tell you, I love helping parishes thrive, and I want to help your parish thrive. And it could be through a workshop. It could be through some coaching. It could be through a cohort. We need to talk to find out what the best way is I can help you do that. But I've been working with parishes in this context for about a decade and working in the church, volunteering, serving, staff, all the roles for about 20 years before that. I know I don't look that old. It looks impossible, but it's true. I'm going to put a link to my Calendly in the chat. I would love to just set up a free half-hour coaching call with you to find out what's going on at your parish, see if there's any way I can help, even give you some coaching feedback in that call. Would love to do that. So that's in the chat. I'll send out more info in the email that goes after this. Craig, tell us about 90-Day Leader, 12 weeks to really get leaders on track and leading better. How does that work?
Yeah, so we found for leadership development, about 86% of new leaders are appointed as leaders accidentally. And so they're appointed as a leader with really no training or development whatsoever, because there's a gap in the team that they're on and someone needs to fill it. And so they were good at doing a job and now they're being asked to lead as if those skill sets translate. And there's a ton of content out there. Like you can go find a lot of leadership resources, like 57,000 books on Amazon. With leadership in the title, there's a lot of good content out there. And what was missing, we found, is actually like the practical tools given in a short enough time period that someone could have the array of tools they need to actually be an effective leader. So what we did is went and curated the 12 most important tools that new leaders need to have to be effective, broke those down to 10 to 12-minute videos so that you don't have to read 12 books, and send those out on Monday mornings when businesses buy seats or churches buy seats for their people. They jump into a cohort, get a video on Monday morning that is that tool, and a personalization guide through Typeform that they can process. How would I utilize this tool of meetings, or the 4 types of meetings and how to lead them, or if it's how to actually have effective accountability, or things on productivity and how to teach those. So get the tool on Monday, personalization guide on how to process, how to utilize that tool, and then a weekly virtual cohort so that they can actually practice using that. So the goal is after 12 weeks, they don't just know more about leadership, that they're actually effective leaders after 12 weeks.
That's great, man. I will tell you that the majority of problems that I see in parishes are leadership issues. And to be fair, we're not trained well in how to be great leaders. And when you throw around words like in the business world, I know some people in the church get a little off put or skeptical of that. But I'll tell you that in the business world, they know they've got to lead well in order to get the most out of their teams, but also to accomplish their mission. And I think sometimes in the church world, we put so much stock in just the fact that we're doing something good that we don't recognize that we also need to lead it well. We need to be strategic, And there's a lot of great things out there that could help us be better leaders. So I put Craig's link in there. I'll put it in the email. Encourage you to check it out. I always encourage people to invest in their teams. Whether that be offsites, whether that be workshops, whether that be giving them a resource like 90-Day Leader, or giving them some sort of online training. It is money well spent. So I encourage you to do that. All right, we're staying on track and on time here. So let's get to the next thing that we need to talk about. Again, remind us about sending out an email before a meeting, not just with the agenda, right? But that's prepping people for the meeting, getting them in the right expectation and mindset for the meeting.
Yeah, and I don't think that's essential for every meeting. I think it depends on what the rhythm is and what you're trying to accomplish. And the better you get at the rhythms, I think the less that you have to necessarily like prep people as they walk in. So it depends. Ad hoc strategic meetings should absolutely have prep where people walk in with the same information. Even have done some brainstorming before they come, so you can get as quickly as possible to the conversation you need to drive decisions around opportunities and problems. If you are going to prep people by email, I think it's really important to tell people what type of meeting this is. So, is this a meeting where we're going to come up with a lot of ideas? Is this a meeting where we're not coming up with any ideas whatsoever? The ideas have happened. We're just going to poke holes in them. Is this a meeting where we're not doing any of that? We're just going to clarify who's doing what around this project. And we're not going to ask any high level questions or talk about opportunities or problems. Or is this a meeting where we're just going to sit down and everyone already knows what they're supposed to do? We're just going to get it done. So I think if you can label what type of meeting it is on the way in, and if it's a blend of those things, call that out. So we're going to come up with some ideas on how to solve this problem or seize this opportunity. We're also going to take time and poke holes in this initiative that's going on. And we're going to just make sure we're clear who's doing what by when for this. If you can set that context and framework for people in advance, that's really effective. If you don't do that in advance, do it as you're starting the meeting as a way of setting stakes, and do it throughout the meeting. Call it out when you're shifting the goal and objective of what it is that you're trying to accomplish during it. And so I think that's really key. And then attaching as much as possible any research information, setting up especially internal processors if you can with what to brainstorm and come ready with in terms of some ideas or solutions is a really effective way to help people kind of show up ready, and oftentimes to hear from people you don't normally hear from that might actually have like the best perspective that you've been missing and need, is to help them prep in advance. So I think those types of emails, even if they're just in the invitation of, I love in the subject line of the invitation, we're coming up with ideas today, or we're not coming up with ideas, whatever your goal is, and then setting up in the context of like the description for the invitation, any links to any resources they need, any prep they should do on the way in, that kind of thing.
Great. And, I think in those meeting announcement emails or reminder emails, I think we don't often enough remind people of the why, like inspire them, make it positive. Not just here's what we're going over, here's how to show, whatever. That kind of leads us into how to lead a meeting well. And I think that positive energy is so important. As a facilitator, one of the first things I was trained was, and when I'm in front of a group of people, I am responsible for the energy in that room. I'm not a reactor to the negative energy. I'm a leader with what I want. When I say energy, I mean kind of the tone, the attitude, right? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it hopeful? Is it, oh, I know you all don't want to be here? Or is it, hey, I'm so glad that we're all here today. We get to do this. Did you know that? There's people that go to work every day doing work that is meaningless, that they hate. We get to do this. So let's come to this meeting, into this time together, excited. If it's appropriate to open with prayer, always start with a short prayer. And then again, with that energy thing, I love this analogy. Be a thermostat, not a thermometer. A thermostat sets the environment. A thermometer reacts to the environment. So being a good leader in meetings is challenging because we weren't really taught how to do it, but a lot of it is setting that energy, expectation, hopefulness, positivity. Any other thoughts on that, Craig?
Man, I think being a thermostat as opposed to a thermometer is so key. And I think one of the best ways to do that, especially if you're getting comfortable with being that type of leader and that's a new thing for you, which it's new for all of us. That's part of the challenge of growth and leadership is making that switch to being proactive instead of reactive and even doing that in the context of other people not operating that way. And one of the best ways to do that I've found that made me most comfortable is calling out, hey, the temperature's here right now. As a thermostat, you have to be able to read the temperature in the room to know what does it need, right? Does it need to get hotter or colder? So call out when you read the temperature in the room. That makes people so much more comfortable to acknowledge like, man, it feels cold in here today. Like this meeting feels kind of stale, or like, man, I feel like we're not like diving in and tackling stuff. Does anyone else feel that way? Or like, man, it feels like we're kind of all over the place and we're rabbit trailing. Does anyone else feel that way for this meeting? Like call out what the temperature is and then be the thermostat and say, okay, can we get here instead? Or can we go here instead? Whatever needs to happen so that they know why you're bringing the energy you're bringing. And people will rally around that and they'll help. Like people, I think, are really willing, especially good people that are plugged into, especially like parishes and churches that they want to do good things with. By and large, I think people want to come around leaders and help make the thing happen. And sometimes all you need is just to call it out and set it as a goal and objective of we're going to get to this temperature or we're going to accomplish this as a leader. And people will even take you there some days that they'll pull you to that spot. And you can still be the thermostat, just setting this is the goal of where we need to go.
I'm so glad you said that because when I say being a thermostat, I don't mean to be fake. I mean to lead with what you hope the other people to experience. But what Craig said is so important. If it's like right after Easter or it's after Christmas or it's after a vacation and just people are tired and dragging, it's okay to say, hey, I know a lot of us are tired. We've had a long week. Because of that, why don't we just take a moment and pray and really invite God into this time and kind of lay our burdens out there before we dive into this important stuff. And don't you think sometimes just acknowledging that and giving people a chance to offer it up can help us move past that and move into the positive direction we need to go?
100%. I think doing that at the start and then playing that role throughout the meeting, you can always course correct. And that's actually one of the most key roles of, how do we do meetings well as leaders of meetings, I think is continuing to be a thermostat, not just at the beginning, but throughout the meeting to recognize, oh, we've rabbit trailed, or oh man, we're really getting into like unhealthy conflict and debate that's not productive. You have to be the one that raises your hand. And there's ways to do this in a way that actually people will love and celebrate and appreciate. It isn't off putting. So just raise your hand and say, hey, it feels like we're here now, or it feels like this is happening. This is the goal in my mind. Is this the goal in everyone else's mind? Okay, what do we do to get here? When I shifted my meeting leadership to being a thermostat instead of thermometer and doing that through asking questions and letting people rally towards those questions instead of making statements, it got so much easier and I felt so much more like myself. And I found that people actually moved a lot faster and further in response to me asking a question, do they want the same thing, and asking for commitment towards that instead of me telling them to get there.
It's good. Well, we've already talked about using that time at the beginning also to set expectations, what type of meeting it is, what we hope to accomplish. How do you feel about devices in meetings? I have been in so many meetings where everybody is on their laptop or their phone, supposedly taking notes, but I'm pretty sure that's not what's happening most of the time. Simon Sinek has even talked about having meetings that are like no device meetings. I'm all for that. I mean, give everybody a notepad and a pen. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I like having it helps me process in meetings to have I have my iPad and like a pencil that I use for everything, and that's mostly gibberish that ends up nowhere. It just helps me stay present and process. And so I think different people process things in different ways. I'm a huge advocate of no device meetings. Offsites rule on the way in. I don't take an offsite if the executive team or owner operator or whatever pastor doesn't wants there to be devices and wants to do these other things in the midst of the offsite. It's not an effective use of time. So offsites, what I facilitate, are all no device. I think ad hoc strategic meetings are no device. We pull them out. One person pulls them out if we have to pull up and screen share some data or pull up some information or look at something in real time. We make sure that if we do that, that it's something everyone can see as the goal, and that's the reason someone pulls a device out. So both of those for meetings that I lead are no device meetings. And then I try daily stand up. There's I don't think a reason to have a device. The weekly sync I think is one of the reasons it's the roughest meeting for most people is it's the one that typically people have devices out the most. So I try to get that no device if possible. And I think that's the goal. It should be a good goal and objective. If it is a device, I'll honestly often look around, and if I see someone's immersed in something, I take that as a chance to say, like, hey, what do you think about this? And I just invite them back into the conversation
Ask them
explicitly.
a question. That's good.
Ask them a question, be
Yeah.
teacher in that sense,
Yeah.
of like get people plugged back in.
In defense of people on their devices, I will say most of the time it's because they're in a meeting they don't need to be in. 90% of it doesn't apply to them, and they're trying to be more productive. If you will make your meetings more brief, more focused, only the people that need to be in the room are in the room, and you follow an agenda, I promise you people will be more engaged. A lot of times they're checked out because it is boring. Someone anonymously shared, and this is a great question. Sometimes we're included expected in meetings by supervisors who do not have a framework for good meetings, or they have an old framework that measures success and activity by being in a meeting. What are some strategies to handle them? Standards to handle the internal tension between engaging with those expectations and the knowledge of what a good meeting is. My first suggestion is going to be a book called Leading from the Second Chair. Leading from the Second Chair is a great book on how to lead upward with people that maybe aren't great leaders in a way that's respectful and helps guide them towards. Craig, what would be your suggestion for kind of coaching up and trying, it's not always possible, but trying to help your leaders lead more effective meetings?
Man, I think being bold to raise your hand and actually like interject a question in the midst of if someone's on a diatribe, or there's so many ways you can participate in meetings and help them be effective without being the leader of them. So I'm a big advocate for raise your hand and say, ask, have a list of questions that you can carry into meetings to help do this. But I love questions like, hey, what are we trying to accomplish right now? And even saying, it sounds like we're doing a little bit of this, a little bit of this. What's the goal right now? Or, hey, how long? So I know how to participate in this conversation. How long do we want to spend on this topic that we're on right now? If there's no clear time-based agenda, or on the way into the meeting, if we're just rolling into regular updates, you can always raise your hand and say, hey, this might just be for me. Can we take a second and take a step back? And whoever the leader is, like, what's the goal today? Like, what are we most trying to accomplish today? What do I need to know as I'm going to listen to these updates and get this information? And then I think after the meeting, going to the person that's responsible for it and saying, and being actually helpful to them and not being doing this from a place of judgment, but genuinely from a place of curiosity. Like, hey, how do you feel like this meeting was today? Did it accomplish what you wanted it to accomplish? Oh, what could we do different next time if we wanted to? How can I help you do that? You can, from the second share, be a resource to someone after the fact on making that meeting rhythm better week after week, with them still staying in that leadership chair. So it's more effective your time, their time, the people around you. There's so many ways to do that from genuine interest and care and curiosity as opposed to judgment, and where that person feels like you're their best gift as opposed to the person that is disrespecting them or not being responsive to their leadership.
It's a tough thing. It is. And some leaders are open. Some leaders would love for somebody to help them lead meetings. They're not good at it. They don't like it. Maybe they're an introvert and it's hard for them. And they might love a staff member to lead these meetings and lead the agenda and let them chime in as they want to. So, I mean, you've got to understand the person that you're working with in order to find out what the best path of that is. But I do think there are ways to help them through that. I put that book, Leading from the Second Chair, in the chat there. We're kind of getting into our in section here. We got about 6 minutes left. Do's and don'ts. I want to share the first do that I heard in an email recently that I love this quote. Be the first to be vulnerable and the last to speak. The first to be vulnerable and the last to speak your opinion is what I mean there. I have seen a leader bring 10 people into a room and say, hey, we're gonna do some planning for the future. I want to get your ideas. This is just an open whiteboard session. What do you think that we should work on? And before we do that, I just want to throw a few ideas out there, right? And he throws up three ideas, and the first person who really just is codependent with him and wants to make him feel good says, well, I don't think we need to discuss anything else. Those are all great. Let's do that. And then it's crowd think and people are afraid to talk. As a leader, if you really want good answers from people, don't be the first to share your opinion. Be the last. Make it a safe place for everybody. And then when you do share your opinion, don't shoot everybody else down. Share it in a way that says, hey, those are some great ideas. Here's how I feel. What do you guys think? Throw it back. Any thoughts on that, Craig? I think that's such something I see so often done wrong. Leaders being the first to share their opinions on things.
Gosh, and that was such a gift when I flipped that switch for me, where I thought good leadership was being the smartest person in the room that had the best ideas and made really strong decisions and could have guide the time and be super efficient and all these different things. When I flipped it to actually be the one that could set a goal or an objective and then sit back and actually watch and help facilitate the team accomplishing that and speak the least of anyone in the meeting. Man, what a gift to me too, and a gift to the a team for the meetings to be facilitated that way. So I absolutely think like a do is state clearly what the goal is, what the problem you're trying to solve for, or the opportunity you're trying to seize, and then ask a question that invites everyone to participate, and then sit back and watch a team do really effective things like that you facilitate and end up maybe making a decision at the end.
Yeah, I've also heard it said that bad leaders make you feel like they're the most important and smartest person in the room. Great leaders make you feel like you are the most indispensable people in the room. They couldn't do it without you. They need your input, and just pay attention. Do you want to be, as Julianne Stan says, do you want to be the sage on the stage, or do you want to be the guide on the side? And great leaders are the guide on the side. And so another do is start on time and stay on time. Like I showed you that outline minute by minute, I highly recommend using a timer on your phone. Say we're going to spend this amount of much time on this topic, and when we're done, we're done. If we need to take it offline, we'll do it. I'm assuming I'm getting an amen from you on that, Craig.
Absolutely. I keep this timer in front of my desk, both for me to accomplish things, and I use this in meetings. I have sand timers up there that I bought that are for teacher tools, and I use those in offsites just so we can watch it trickle down. And I use timers all the time, and people feel so respected, and they are concise, and they contribute when they know that there's limited time available. We're not just going to talk as long as everyone wants to talk. We're going to get down to it and come to some good decisions.
And again, starting on time and keeping people on track and on time are things that are going to offend some people. It's going to bother people. But all the people that are there, which is the majority that show up on time and that want to stay on track, you're going to make those people happy. They're going to feel advocated for by you. So part of being a leader is just disappointing people. That's just the reality of it. And if you've been a not on time team, I will tell you, if you will be disciplined in this starting on time thing for several weeks, people begin to realize, oh, we're starting on. It's going to take you some time to shift the culture. And it's going to be rough and uncomfortable while you do, but stay the course and it will become the normal thing of how you do things. Another thing I like to say is, I learned this from somebody recently. Instead of saying, are there any questions? Because nobody wants to ask a question because they don't want to look dumb and they don't want to delay the ending of the meeting. Asking this question, what is the least clear thing about what we've been talking about? That begs an answer. Craig, do you have any other suggestions for questions that really engage people more?
Man, I love ending meetings with here's the decisions we made today. From 1 to 5, how confident is everyone that these are the right decisions? And go one by one and get their actual individual commitment to those. And then you can see, really, are we walking away fully aligned to this and believing these are right? Or are we walking away and someone's like a 2 on this? And that's a person you can go to after, or maybe it's a topic you bring up again. And so I love that question of how good of a decision do you think this is? How how give me a sense of percentage, like how successful do you think this is going to be based on the thing the conversation we had today, or based on how you see the organization. So yeah, all pointed specific questions as opposed to generalized. Love the question, is there what's the least clear thing to you? I love the question also of what's the one most important thing that you're taking away from the meeting today that actually helped you with your job. Oftentimes what I would have thought would be the list for people of those things is not their list. And I learn what's helpful to people by asking that question every meeting.
That also says that you care about whether this time was valuable to them, and that's important. I'm going to buzz through some things here for the sake of time. One is keep your meeting commitments. Don't just not show up for people or have your secretary tell them that you can't make it. Reschedule if necessary. Communicate with people if you're not able to do it. But if you just cancel a meeting or don't show up or don't communicate about it, you're telling people their time's not important and that topic is not important. And so be clear. I am so sorry. I want to do this. We'll reschedule it in a time that works for you, but communicate well with people on that. And then last I would say, is create a great meeting space. I think so many meeting rooms in our parishes are just beige and boring and bland and blah. And look, put a coat of paint on the wall, put up a whiteboard, get some comfortable chairs. The environment that you meet in will impact the energy of the people there and the effectiveness of the meeting. Meet off-site when you can. Meet outside. I know this is not the best time of year for it. Meet outside if take it somewhere else to keep people's attention. Any other thoughts about the environment, Craig? Suggestions, tips for that?
Absolutely. I think if it's a stand-up meeting, do it standing up. You know,
Mm-hmm.
as people sit down, they're gonna be, it's gonna take longer. I think if it's an idea meeting, have a whiteboard or a flip chart. Make sure so that you can paste them around the room and people can see the ideas developing in real time instead of you just capturing ideas or trusting on notes after. So make it visual for people. So the environment, if it's an offsite, making it to where people really can relax and know that we have space to have longer conversations about things that are more abstract and sometimes the most important problems or opportunities we need to seize. So matching the environment to the goal of the meeting is so key in facilitating that as a leader.
I'm going to break a rule right now. Don't end on a negative, but we're going to end with the don'ts. So, don't hand things out at the beginning of the meeting that aren't going to be discussed for another 25 minutes, and people look at them and read over them the entire first half of the meeting, and they're irrelevant to that part of the meeting. Don't have a printed handout with all the bullet points of the same things that are on the slides that you're going to show, or just read through bullet points that people have on a piece of paper in front of them. That's a great example of a meeting that should have been an email. Email them the bullet points if you want. Talk from them if you'd like to, but don't just read through them. Talk to people, ask questions, engage them. Don't talk about issues that only involve a few people in the room. We've said that. Don't talk about people who aren't in the meeting. This should go without saying, but I've been in staff meetings and listened to a pastor talking negatively about someone on staff who's not there and asking everyone else what they think about them. Now, that's just bad leadership, but it needs to be said. Meetings need to feel like a safe space. And they're safe if we're only speaking about and to the people that are in the room. If we need to mention someone who's not there, we mention that, hey, we'll connect with them later on this. But not in a negative way. Don't put someone on the spot without warning them. Don't put them on the spot for something that you have not prefaced them ahead of time. We need to talk about this today. And don't confront them in front of other people on something that you haven't talked to them in person. You talked about confrontation earlier. You know, part of confronting people is you do it in private if it's an issue that is like an ongoing issue that you want to talk to them about. Right. And then in public, if it's in the midst of the meeting, if there's an issue, somebody gets out of hand, somebody's off topic, that's very different. Craig, before we go, what is your number one don't do in meetings when you're leading them?
I think don't leave them just as they are is what's coming to mind for me. I think have the expectation that they should get better and better and better all the time. And so expect them to shift and change and grow and develop and the people to get better at participating in them, you to get better as a leader in doing them. So just setting, we have our hour rhythm once a week and we do 5 minutes a day. And it just, if your meeting feels the same way 3 months from now that it does today, there's something wrong with that. It should be getting better and better and more effective all the time.
Well, we've just given you 1 hour. This is not in any way an exhaustive conversation on how to have great meetings. I encourage you to Google it. There's some great resources out there on how to have better meetings. Spend some time as a leader, invest in yourself. I promise you, if you start leading better meetings, you will see the attitude of people toward meetings change. It's just a reality. Most of them have bad attitudes because they've been forced to sit through a lot of bad meetings, and we all have. So let's not do that as leaders. Craig, thank you so much. I'll send people your information. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I pray for you that you will continue to grow as leaders and encourage and inspire people in the mission of your parish and your diocese. Thank you. God bless.